Okay, we're back for texturing these 6 objects inside of Photoshop. We built them, and then we unwrapped them, and now we're going to be texturing them. I'm going to open up Photoshop, and I'm going to go to my folder I made, 6 objects. I'm going to drag in my lines like this, and I don't see anything. But if I add a new layer, and I press G or the fill button, and I drag this layer down, I have my lines now. I'm going to bring in my reference picture so I know what things are supposed to look like. And I just need maybe these 2 pictures. Just hit Control J. I went to M or the selection rectangle. If you don't have this, you can click and hold, you can move to it. Control J just duplicates them. Put them closer together. Make them a little bit larger. I'm going to take this layer and I'm going to name it Lines. And I'm going to right click and I'm going to make it red, so I know this is Lines. And I'm going to call this one Ref or Reference. Now I'm going to start with the floor. Now this floor section is made up of a bunch of rocks. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a texture that is rocks. So let's see, ground, something similar. Just use something like this. Just going to drag it in Photoshop. I'm going to make sure that it goes slightly outside of the green lines wherever I place it. Now, you should never make anything larger. It'll just ruin the resolution. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line it up as best I can. And then I'm going to duplicate it up like this. And this top one, I don't like this edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a mask. And I'm going to go to the brush tool. I'm going to right click and I'm going to make it as soft as possible. I'm going to make it big. And what a mask does is whenever I draw, it's going to erase that section. And if I switch to white, it's going to draw it back. And so I press X to switch between them. What I'm just going to do is just try to get rid of that line. Just try to make it look kind of nice. And I've got these. I'm going to duplicate this ground one again by Control J. Just scoot it up. And I'm going to try to cover these seams as well. I'm just going to duplicate Control J, scoot down here. Add a mask. Just erase it back. I can right click to adjust the size, or I can use the brackets. You want to try to make it look as good as you can. Scoot that there. Now there's sections down here I don't want to show up. So I'm just going to I'm going to press M to grab this tool. I'm going to press B. I'm just going to erase that section down there. Control D to get rid of that section. Now, all of this, I don't want to have thousands of unmarked layers. So I'm going to click the top one, hold Shift, click here, and press Control G to put them in a layer. Name it Stone Floor. So I can just turn them on and off like that. Now I'm going to go to my box for the crate. And I see this crate has boards that go straight down and then boards to the side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a picture of wood. And you'll have to go to Google to get pictures like this. Let's go to wood. Every time I download a piece of texture, I put it in my texture file so I have it for later. Let's grab something like, it's a character. Use that one. I'm going to use this picture to make my texture. Now all this stuff is it's making it hard to see. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hide my references and my stone floor. And I just want one of these little boxes. So I'm going to go to my lines and I'm going to press W to go to this magic wand tool. And I'm going to turn it to contiguous. That just means that it won't select the magic wand tool. If I select this color, it's going to select it with contiguous on everywhere across the entire picture. With contiguous on, it's only going to grab things that are touching it. The second it breaks up with another edge, it's going to stop. I just want one of these boxes so I know that I've got a square. Control D, grab this rectangular selection tool. Just going to Control J, so I have my own little box. I'm going to hide my lines. Control T will do free transform. I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger, like this. And double click to exit. I'm going to take my planks. Let's say I put them like that. And now I've got to make the edges. So I'm just going to grab one board like this. M to go to the rectangular selection tool. Control J to duplicate it. I'm going to put it at the top like this. And I'm going to make sure that the nails show up here. I'm going to take this section about halfway here, just delete it. Grab another board, say this one. Control J, scoot it down here. Now there's always going to be some perspective distortion, so I'm just going to delete that section off. The nails in. I'm going to grab this piece. I don't like that hard edge there. So I'm just going to delete it. And I'm going to do that again. Just going to grab another board. Control J. I'm going to turn this one sideways, holding Shift. Grab it, see if I can use the other side. Control X will delete what's there. Control V will paste it. Delete that little section there. And I'm going to grab one more board for this diagonal one. Control J. Hold Shift, get it 45 degrees. I'm going to hide the parts I don't need, like that. Delete that section. I'm going to go to this. I'm just going to grab this section in the middle and Control J so I can hide the board that's popping out. I'm going to turn my lines off. And now these sections, they don't really pop up very well. So like this top one, I'm just going to click it here. I'm just going to say delete that. Now I want these sections to really stand up and seem like they're in 3D. But the only way to get them to do that is to, well, I guess there's a couple of different ways. Just double click on it. And I'm going to go to bevel. And I'm just going to turn it up so it's obvious what's happening. And I'm going to turn up its power. Basically, it's faking a light source. As you see, I move this thing. You'll see that it changes the way that this is popping up. I'm just going to put it, the light kind of coming towards this way. I'm going to turn these down. And I don't want them to be such hard edges. So I'm going to say soften. Turn its size down. Not soften that hard. I just want it to stick up above these here. Hit OK. And I'm just going to right click, so I don't have to do that for each one. I'm just going to right click and I'm going to hit copy layer style. I'm going to go down, paste layer style. Now this light part is actually too strong. If in 3D this box is upside down and this is lit up instead of dark, it won't make sense. So I'm just going to double click it, and I'm going to turn down the light side. Hit OK. Paste layer style. Turn down the white side. Turn down the dark side too. Hit OK. I'm going to copy this new layer style. Paste layer style. Make things larger, but I'm just going to do it for speed's sake. And for the last one, paste layer style. I'm going to delete some here so it's more obvious. You'll see it start to. Now, these back here should be darker because less light gets to them because they're about an inch back or half an inch or whatever this board's width is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this. I'm going to hit Image, Adjustments, and Curves, Control M. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring the darks up. Not too much, but just enough to make sure that it's obvious that it's different. I guess I could try lightening it. No, I don't like that. And I'm going to take all of these, and I'm going to click one, hold Shift, Control G to put them in a group. And okay, I'll hide my lines and see what it looks like. I didn't quite go far enough with that one. All right, that'll probably do. I'm going to add one new layer, and I'm going to go to my brush tool or B. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw some what are called cast shadows. Now these are going to be way too hard, but I'm going to fix that in a second. This is ambient occlusion, the section I'm doing here. Just less light gets in. If I hold down Shift and click, I can draw lines between them. Or if I click and hold Shift, it'll draw a straight line whichever direction I'm going. It's really easy to overdo this, or I'm going to turn it way down. Just makes it a little deeper. And now I don't like the colors of this. If I look at my reference, it's more yellowy. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab all of this, put it in a folder, so that if I can come back and change it, but I'm going to hit Control J, so I have a duplicate of that folder and everything in it, Control E to merge it down to a picture. And now what I'm going to do is hit Control M, and I'm going to go through here, and I'm just going to make some adjustments. Turn the red down a little bit, green up, blue. Now I'm overdoing the yellow here. And what I'm going to do is I've got the one underneath it and it, and I'm just going to turn it down, its opacity. I just have a slightly more yellow version. And I'm going to Control J, Control E. I'm going to hide this layer. I'm going to click this one and hold down Control and press E to merge these down. So now it's just one big piece. I'm going to label this box group. And I'm going to throw the old planks in there. And I'm going to turn my line layer back on. And there's a problem inside of Photoshop that I'm just going to show you how this works. If I make something smaller and then I make it larger, so let's say anytime I make something larger, the resolution is going to be damaged. And if I make it small again, Make it really small to speed this up. Now I'm going to make it big again. Every time I change the size, it's going to lose resolution, but we can fix that. I'm going to tell Photoshop, right-click to editable or smart object. What this does is it saves the picture of this layer in a folder. And what it allows me to do is it will resample that same picture every time. So it will lose resolution when it gets larger. And when it gets smaller. But if I keep changing it, it's going to just keep checking that original picture. And so the resolution will never get more altered than just the one transformation. This allows us pretty much infinite changes, and it's very nice. Turn lines on. And I'm just going to fill each one of these squares with this box that I made. And I missed a section here. But as long as it's outside of the green, we should be fine. I'm just going to Control J, duplicate it. Now, if you know all of these faces are going to be exactly the same, we'll just put all of these on top of each other into one spot. But I want a couple to be different. Control J. And on my reference, it had a word here. So I'm just going to grab all of these, Control G, all these box, group, lines. I'm going to add a new layer. I'm going to go to my text tool, or T. I'm going to switch to white, and I'm going to say cats. I'm holding Control to drag. I'm going to Control A, and I want to change the font or the typeface. I'm just going to click up here, drag up, click. When it's blue, I can press down or up and just pick the right font. Say this font, and then it has different sizes. Like Arial is one of the ones you should go with most of the time. I can select this up and down to change the size. I'm just going to sweep this here. And I want it to look like it's actually written here. And if you see layer, press M to get to something else, this resolution is pretty low. And this is why sometimes you want to put each one of these objects on their own UV map. But for this project, it's simpler to put them in one spot. This doesn't look like it's actually on this object. So I'm going to make it look like it was painted on there. I can go to opacity and I can try to adjust it like this. I also have layer styles. If I click them, it's blue, and I press down. I can scroll through, see if there's any that make it feel like it's on top of it. White's a pretty difficult one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to double click. In fact, I'm going to make this a little bigger. Control T, something like that. I'm going to double click on it, and I'm going to pull out a feature that allows me to, like if I drag this handle, and this one, anything that's dark is going to show through on this. So I'm just going to drag it this way, so like it wouldn't be in the cracks. And I'm going to hold down Alt to separate this to soften it some more. See, it seems like it's been written there. I'm going to hit OK. And I'm going to turn down the opacity of this because it's a little worn out. Gives me kind of a realistic look to it. Right. Now I've got my barrel, and I'm going to keep a barrel texture on me at all times, just for this specific tutorial. Because they're a little complicated to make, you want to be able to make your own, just the same way I did this, but I'm going to just take this one for speed's sake. I'm going to tell it convert to smart object, Control T. Control J, and I'm just going to, instead of drag this by holding Control and dragging, I'm going to hold down Control and Shift. I'm just going to scoot it over like this. And we use the technique we used before. I'm going to hide my lines, and I'm going to add a mask. I'm going to press B or go to the brush tool. Find where the bad seam is, and set it like that. It's a pretty low res texture. I definitely need to make that correctly, but we're going to leave it there. Now I believe these are the top of the barrels. Press M, and I want to cut these out as a circle. So I'm just going to go to Circle Ellipse tool, hold Shift so that it doesn't smash to keep it proportional. Grab it like this, Control J. Convert to Smart Object. You should always find textures that are larger than what you need instead of smaller and stretch them up like I'm doing. Basically, don't be a hypocrite. Now, if while I'm doing this, I want to see if what I'm doing is right. Like this might be the shield, I don't know. I'm going to make sure, first I'm going to select this, Control G. If you don't do the naming thing, you will eventually regret it. It's just something you have to do. I'm going to hide the lines really quick. And I'm going to say File, Save As, and I'm going to call this 6 Objects Builder. What that means is that I can come back and keep working on this in Photoshop because it's the builder for these objects. I'm going to save it as a TIFF file because unlike a Photoshop document or a PSD, it's going to let me see a preview of it without having to be inside Photoshop. PSDs are actually obnoxious file formats that are overly large, and not being able to double click and just see what's in it beforehand with a thumbnail is particularly painful. And I'm going to go into Maps, hit Save, and now I'm going to go into Max. I'm going to press M to bring up my material editor, or this, and I'm going to drag out another material, and I'm going to call this object M_6 objects. The M means material. And I'm going to go to find my 6 objects, maps. I'm going to drag this picture in. I'm going to put it on base color map. I'm going to say be rough. I'm going to tell it to apply to these objects. So I'm just going to drag this onto them like this. I'm going to press F4 so that I can see them. And now I can see that if I'm texturing something, it's going to work. And this is something that the reason why we laid this out without the bend in it like it is here is because I can come back now, double click here, go to scale with R, and I can just pull this out. Unwrapping an object that's bent like this is actually quite difficult, but it's really easy like this and very easy to texture in Photoshop. Now I'm going to go back to Photoshop. I'm going to texture the rest of it. Now, for the shield, it's going to have metal sections. And I want a rusty metal. Something like that. Now, if your Photoshop's not set up like mine, This is the navigator. It lets me zoom in and zoom out. I can also hold Control plus or minus to do this. If I go to Windows and I go to Navigator, it'll pop up. So say yours looks like this. I want my navigator. It may be here. I can click it and drag it and bring it here. And I can select between them. I'm going to make a shield layer by Control G. Shield. And this little icon here means it's already a smart object. I'm going to go to M, hold Shift, because I don't want to fill up all these areas with that texture as well. Just going to hit Control J. Now for the wood sections of this shield, I have some wood. Holding Shift to drag out. Something like that. Now I want to make sure that it's exactly at this curve. So I'm going to go to my polygonal lasso tool. I'm just going to click around like this. Then I'm going to hit Control J on that wood layer. And what that's going to do, it's going to give me that wooden center section. Now I want this center section to be made out of metal. I'm just going to hold down Shift. And I'm going to just press backspace to cut it out of the metal. Control D to hide these lines. Something like that. Wood, put it back over here. Cut a circle out of it, holding Shift to keep it proportional. Control J, hide that layer. Now, these sections of this sword, let's find a metal. Something like that. Metal is not a picture as much as it is a blurry mirrored reflection. Now I'm just gonna stick it here. Shift to warp it. You don't want to do this much. I'm just doing it for speed. Distorting a texture or pictures. Bad business practice. Put this in a folder, Control G, sword, Control J. Shift to make it snap. Duplicate it again. I'm going to hide my lines. I'm going to get rid of this seam. So I'm just going to add a mask, B, and erase that out like that. Now I'm going to grab both of these and I'm going to merge them together, Control E. And I'm going to press L to go to my selection. And I'm just going to cut off the sections that are too far away from my sword so they don't interfere with the others. Unwrap. Stuff like this. Just a very quick test. I'm going to hit Control S. You have to save. I'm not asking you. Save it as a secondary copy. _1. Just want to see what it's going to look like. Base color. Yeah. Now, let's get to the bag really quickly. We're still not done with the sword because I want to say that any section, like along these pieces, is going to be lighter because it's going to be ground all the time. So it's going to have a finer polish. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select, and if I would have spent more time, it wouldn't look so strange. This outer section. Hit Control J to make a duplicate. Hide the lines. You can always turn the lines down. And I'm going to hit Control M to bring up curves. I'm just going to lighten it up. And these sections, like right here, I'm actually going to add a new layer. I'm going to draw a quick little mask. This is just going to keep it from going anywhere else. I'm going to press B, and I want to add a highlight. I'm going to adjust my opacity, and I can do that by pressing 1 is 10, 2 is 20, 30, 40, 8 is 80. So I'm just going to press 1, and I'm going to hit Control H to hide this. I'm just going to kind of pop it up a little bit. Press L again to do it up here. You can really easily overdo this. Control H to hide it. It's still there, but I just want to put in just a little bit. L. Control D to hide it. Just give it a little something. Now, there's still the bag, and the bag has something special. Because it's warped, I have to do some different work. So what I'm going to do is material, I think. No, not material. Maybe it is material. Just looking for something that's fabric-y. That's what I want. Make sure it's in its own folder. Control G, bag. Make sure that it's actually editable. Shrink it down. And it's going to be hard to make this turn corners and things like that. But I have a trick for this. I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to warp. Warp lets me grab corners and do this to them. Duplicate that layer, do the same thing to this section. Except for, I think that's probably doesn't like when you don't select it perfectly. You can do it. Press L. I want to make sure that I'm warping it to match, but if it's warped too much and it's obvious, then I'm going to have to do the same trick that I did to everything else and mask everything out. Warp it some, add a second one, mask. Now this, the bag still needs a name. I still need to make all of these look exactly like they do in the picture. In this reference, I'm just doing this for speed. Save, tell me you can't save. File, save it as number. Back. Now, if we're here, we've got the pictures and everything's going to look correct. But what I'm going to do next is I also need another map, a map that says how rough everything is, and a map that says what if everything is metal or not. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say everything that's metal, I'm going to put on a black and white picture, and everything that's not metal is going to be black, and everything that is metal will be white. So I'm going to go to the sword layer, and everything in the sword is metal. So I'm going to duplicate the sword layer, Control J, and I'm going to hit Control E. It's on its own layer, scoot it up here, and I'm going to put it in a layer called metal. I'm going to tell this layer, I'm going to hit Control U, which will bring up hue and saturation. It's under image. And I'm going to drag white all the way up. Do the same thing with the shield. I'm just going to duplicate the shield layer. I'm going to hide anything that's not metal. I'm just going to hold down Control and select this thumbnail to select it. I'm going to go down to this metal layer. I'm going to cut this out. Hide the other shield layer. I've only got metal showing up like this. I'm going to hit Control E, Control U, set it to white. Image, adjustments, hue and saturation. Where'd you go? There you are, hue and saturation. I'll just scoot this back up to the metal section. And then I've got the barrel. I'm going to come down to the barrel section. I'm going to add a new layer here. I'm going to press M, and I'm going to take this off circular to rectangular. I'm going to grab it. I'm just going to press G to go to the fill tool. Yours may be on gradient. If you click and hold and go down to here, I'm just going to fill this in with white. And now on this, I'm going to add a new layer, Control D, press X, fill it in with black. I can change color by double clicking. Excuse me. I'm going to pick black, hit OK, fill. And now this is my metalness map. I'm just going to say File, Save As, and I'm going to say On My Computer, and I'm going to call it 6 objects, and I'm going to call this metal. And I'm not going to save it as a TIFF. I'm going to save this. I'm going to select it. Do this a slightly different way. I'm going to go Export, Export As. It's Export. desktop, maps, metal, and I'm going to save it as a PNG. Hit save. Now, the metalness map is going to give me two things. Anything that's metal in here is going to be rough, but it's not going to be as rough as the wood. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say anything that's white is going to be as rough as anything, or as rough as something can be, because it equals 1 in 3ds Max, and black is going to equal 0. Well, I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to call this one roughness. And I'm going to say that instead of black, I'm going to say that everything is wood is going to be really rough, and everything that's metal this is going to be rough, but it's not going to be as rough as the actual wood. I'm just going to Control U to bring up my hue and saturation. I'm just going to test this out. File, export, export as. I'm going to call this one roughness. I'm going to save this again, Control S. And I'm going to we'll save all these layers. But for Max, to save basically computer power, I'm going to hit export as, and this is a compression format. It's going to remove the layers, and I'm going to call this one diffuse, the color of the light that bounces off an object. Now I'm going to go back into Max, bring up my materials, desktop, 6 objects. I'm just going to drop these in. Diffuse, metalness, roughness. Now I'm going to drop the base color here, and I'm going to take the metalness, and I'm going to drag it to metal. I'm going to drag the roughness to roughness. And the shield's acting slightly different. I'm going to hide these two things. I'm just going to select them. I'm going to go over here. I can click this icon, and it's going to pop up. Let's just say that all of this is gone on yours. This is my layers menu. And I'm just going to dock it over here. Not like that, like this. It's a little touchy. I'm going to press this little arrow, and what it's going to let me do is hide things with little eyeballs, just like Photoshop. Now, if you see this bag, it still needs a smoothing group. It's not smooth. And the shield, so the shield must be turned off. File, export, export as. There we go. And now with all of these, I'm going to press 5 to go to object. And I'm just going to scale this up with R. I'm going to try to set the scene to look exactly like the original. I'm going to add a light in. I'm just going to go to plus. I'm going to go to this and set it to Arnold lights. I'm just going to click an Arnold light, click and drag. This is where the light's pointed, and this is where it's aiming. I'm going to go to modify so I can adjust it. And now I don't see anything happening here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up this Arnold render view. And I'm going to press render. Render is F10. And I'm going to say, okay, so this is your size of the document, how big it'll be. All right, hit X. Yours will look like this. I'm going to hit play. And this is going to show me what this is going to look like as I do things with this light. Now, this light doesn't seem to go very far, so I'm going to scroll down. And I'm going to make sure that normalized energy is off. And these two numbers, this number here, exposure, multiplies this number. So if I set this to 4, it's going to get brighter. But if I set it back to 1, this number tops out at 14. So I'm going to say 5. So what I want is a combination of the two to give me the appropriate brightness. Move it here. Now, if you're seeing, there's no light nothing coming back here to behind it. The light should hit and bounce back. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pause this really quick. Just hit the stop button. I'm going to bring up my materials. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And I'm going to bring in what's called I'm going to go to the search, HDRI, High Dynamic Range Image. Drag it in, and it's going to ask me to look for a picture. It's got a bunch of them. These are just background pictures. You can't really see them. I'm going to go to pick one so you can actually see them. Skies. Now, this is the Grand Canyon. They're just shots that show you every single angle of something. And I'm going to pick a lower resolution one just for computer speed. And now, in the background of this image, if I press 8 on my keyboard or I go to Render, 8, Environments, I can change the background color of this. So if I go to black, I can set it to purple, and now it's purple. But instead of just picking a normal color, what I want to do is I want a picture back here. So this HDRI, when I drag it here, and I'm just going to say instance, it's going to put that picture back there. And what is so special about that is when I go back to Arnold Render View, and I'm going to turn off this light. I'm going to go turn that off, and I'm going to hit play. You're going to see that it's taking the lighting from this scene and it's lighting everything up just a little bit from this light, how the real world works. And you'll see that this slowly cleans up your piece. It's like a quick sketch, and then it slowly cleans it up more and more. Now, 1 second. I'm going to take this light and I'm going to turn it back on, hit play so we can see it. And what I want is the combination of these two lights. This is what's going to give us realism. By combining the two lights, the gentle backlight and the main light, I'm going to get a good looking light. Now, if we see here, these metal sections are so shiny, like they're just as reflective, like they have oil on them. So what I'm going to do is I don't want them to be that reflective. So I'm going to go to Photoshop. I'm going to go to my roughness channel. And I'm just going to make these lighter. Just Control U. This is better done in Substance Painter, but you have to know how to do it in Photoshop so that you can actually work on it in Substance Painter. Substance Painter would just let me see what the roughness does inside Max. I'm just going to go to Export, Export As. And make sure that whenever you make one of these adjustments that you hit Control S to save this file, the original. Go back to Max. Now it's got to update that file, so it takes a second. Let's go Arnold interview, play. See how now they're more dull, but they seem more metal because they're more like a mirror reflected. Now this bag is one of the last problems. I'm just going to press 4 and hit this object. Will select everything here. I'm going to go to its smoothing groups. I'm just going to clear. I'm going to put one smoothing group on it, but that makes it too weird. This is just, it's saying that it's smooth like that, but it actually isn't. Whenever it renders, you'll see, like if I go to Arnold, see, it's actually not glossy like that. But I want this section here to feel like a hard edge. So I'm just going to press 4 to go to polygons. Grab these. I'm going to go to grow. And I'm going to give them a different smoothing group. Now I still need to put some stuff in here and wrap a rope around this section. Those are all things that you're going to figure out how to do. And this background section, I don't want it to show the picture back there. I'm press M, bring up my material editor or this button. I'm going to go to the HDR section here. On this side, I have my options. I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to say, use custom background. I'm going to click it. And let's just leave it as black. It'll give me the lighting from the picture, but it'll also give me the not having the picture back there. Hit play. And this is the type of thing that you want. Now, once this is done, you can see the loading bar down here. Let's say it is done. I'm going to go to File, Save Image As. Folder. Max Renders. Name this 6 objects. Render 22 underscore 1. Doesn't like my underscore, do you? Which symbol don't you like? There we are. And I'm going to make sure that I save my max. I'm going to put this as A. And that's the basics of modeling, unwrapping, and texturing objects for photorealistic renders. Hopefully this has been helpful and you've gained some ability to do something that you couldn't before. It is more complicated than this when dealing with characters and other things, but I hope this will help you make just about anything in the future. All right, that's the end. Have a good one.